I knew something was wrong the moment I woke up. Not because of the pain, though there was plenty of that, a deep, surgical ache below my navel that felt like someone had reached inside me and rearranged my organs, which I suppose they had. Not because of the silence, though the room was too quiet for a room that should have held a newborn's cry. Not even because of the smell, that particular hospital smell of antiseptic and fear and the metallic tang of blood that never quite washes out. I knew because of the weight. The baby they placed in my arms, this tiny, squalling thing wrapped in a yellow blanket with ducks on it, felt wrong. Not heavy, not light, just wrong, like picking up a glass expecting water and finding it empty, like reaching for a doorknob in the dark and touching something soft instead. I looked at her eyes. They were blue. Pale, watery blue, the kind that newborns have before their real color settles in. But I had spent 9 months dreaming of dark eyes. My mother's eyes, my grandmother's eyes, the eyes of every woman in my family who had survived something impossible and passed the story down through their gaze. "She's beautiful," my mother-in-law said. Margaret. She was already there, perched on the edge of my bed like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "Look at those cheeks." Just like David's. David was in the corner, pale and exhausted, still in his suit from court. He smiled at me. It was a strange smile, tight at the edges like a gift wrapped too quickly. "Hey Mom," he said. "Maybe give Priya a minute." "Nonsense," Margaret said. She didn't look at him. She was looking at the baby, devouring her with her eyes. "She needs family around her. She needs to feel supported." "Isn't that right, Priya?" I tried to speak. My throat was raw from the intubation, my tongue thick with the residue of anesthesia. The lunar I managed, the birthmark on her shoulder, the ultrasound showed. "Oh honey," Margaret laughed. It was her church laugh, the one she used at bake sales and funeral receptions and the meetings of her rosary group. "Newborns change by the hour, the anesthetic's still in your system. You'll see her properly once you rest." She took the baby from me. Gently but firmly. "The way you take something that belongs to you," I slept. "My name is Priya. I'm 31 years old. I'm an emergency pediatrician at County General in Chicago, which means I spend my nights in a fluorescent-lit box, deciding which children get the last bed in the ICU and which ones go home with Tylenol and prayers. I grew up in a house where English was my third language, where my parents worked 16-hour shifts at a convenience store so I could have textbooks instead of hand-me-downs, where love was shown through sacrifice instead of words. They died when I was 19, car accident, ice on the Dan Ryan Expressway. My father swerved to avoid a truck and hit a barrier instead. My mother was wearing her seatbelt. It didn't matter. I became an orphan at 19, a doctor at 26, a wife at 28, and I thought a mother at 30. I met David in medical school. Well, he was in law school, I was in medical school, and we met at a party where neither of us wanted to be. He was gentle. He was patient. He listened to me talk about my parents for 3 hours without checking his phone. He didn't flinch when I told him I didn't believe in God, that I couldn't, not after the night I spent in a hospital waiting room holding a bag of my mother's jewelry because no one could tell me where the bodies were. His mother was different. Margaret was a retired nurse, a widow, the kind of woman who had spent 40 years in a Catholic hospital administering communion to the dying, and believed that gave her a direct line to divine authority. She was polite to me, always polite. But I saw the way she looked at my skin, my name, the fact that I worked nights and weekends, and had no interest in joining her rosary group. I saw the way she said exotic when she meant not white. I saw the way she touched my stomach at 4 months pregnant and said, "Let's hope she gets David's coloring." I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself grief made me paranoid. I told myself that love meant accepting the family that came with it, even the parts that made you feel small. I told myself a lot of things. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Priya, and this channel is where we tell the truth about the families who pray together and pray together. If this is your first time listening, hit that subscribe button. We post stories every week, real stories, hard stories, stories about women who stopped apologizing for surviving. Here's my story. I went back to work 6 weeks after the birth. "Too soon," my attending said. "You'll hemorrhage," my OB said. But I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't stay in the nursery with the yellow ducks and the mobile that played Brahms and the baby who looked at me with eyes that never quite focused on my face. I named her Ava. David chose it, said it meant life in Latin. I didn't tell him that in Sanskrit the root meant something closer to sound or voice. I didn't tell him that when I whispered her name in the dark, she never turned toward me. Not once. I told myself it was postpartum depression. The statistics were on my side. 1 in 7 women, higher for women of color, higher for women with traumatic births, higher for women who had lost their own mothers. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. I started an SRI. I went to a support group where white women in Lululemon talked about their birth plans, and I sat in the corner and said nothing. But I was a doctor, and doctors don't ignore data. Ava's blood type was negative. David was a positive. I was B positive. 2 positive parents can have a negative child, but the probability is low. I told myself it was possible. I told myself not to obsess. Ava had no birthmark on her left shoulder. The ultrasound at 20 weeks had shown one clearly, a small dark patch the size of a dime just below the scapula. The tech had pointed it out. It's just pigment, she'd said. Nothing to worry about, might fade by kindergarten. But it wasn't there. I checked every day, running my fingers over Ava's smooth shoulder while she nursed, searching for something that wasn't there. And then there was the night I couldn't sleep, one of many, and I logged into the hospital's birth records system. I shouldn't have. It was a violation of policy, of ethics, of the HIPAA training we all slept through. But I was looking for something specific. I was looking for the other baby. The one born at 3:47 a.m. on March 14th. The same minute as Ava, I found her, or rather I found the record. Female infant, 6 pounds 4 ounces, delivered by Dr. Henry's same minute. Mother's name, Lucia Herrera, 24, no insurance, no emergency contact, address listed as transient. Discharged at 6:15 a.m. Less than 3 hours after delivery. No follow-up appointment. No pediatric referral. Just gone. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. 2 babies. Same minute, same hour. One went home with a pediatrician mother in a Lexus. The other went home with a transient in a taxi that no one had called. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself coincidences happen. I told myself to go home, kiss my husband, hold my daughter, and stop looking for monsters in the database. But I didn't stop. I confronted Margaret on a Tuesday. I remember because it was my day off, and David was at work, and Ava was at the daycare. Margaret had insisted on a Christian environment, Priya, not some government facility, and I was alone in the house with my mother-in-law, who had come over to help with laundry. She was folding Ava's onesies. Methodically, precisely. The way she did everything. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, and I thought about my own mother, who had folded laundry while singing old Bollywood songs, who had never once made me feel like a guest in my own home. Margaret, I said. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this. I was a doctor. I knew how to deliver bad news. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She didn't look up. Of course, dear, you know you can ask me anything. The night Ava was born, there was another woman in labor, same time. Lucia Herrera. Do you know that name? The onesie in her hands paused. Just for a second, a heartbeat, but I saw it. Lucia, she repeated. She said it wrong. The accent on the wrong syllable, the consonants too hard. I don't think so, dear. I was in the waiting room with David. I didn't see any other mothers. You were a nurse for 40 years, I said. You know every person who walks through those doors. You have friends on every floor. And you were in my room within minutes of me waking up. You weren't in the waiting room. You were already there. She looked at me then. Her eyes were blue like Ava's, like David's, like the winter sky in Chicago, which looks beautiful until you're trapped in it. Priya, she said. She smiled. It was her church smile. You're exhausted. You're working too much. You're not bonding with Ava the way you should, and it's making you imagine things. Postpartum depression is very real, very serious. David and I have been concerned. I'm not depressed, I said. I'm a doctor. I know the difference between depression and deception. Do you? She set down the onesie. She walked toward me. Slowly, the way she walked down hospital corridors, the way she approached grieving families. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Priya? I see a woman who thinks she's entitled to everything because she worked hard. Who thinks her degree makes her better than the women who actually raised children. Who looks at her own daughter and sees a diagnosis instead of a gift. I see a baby who doesn't have my eyes, I said. Who doesn't have my blood type. Who doesn't have the birthmark that was on her ultrasound. I see a baby who was switched. Margaret's face didn't change. Not a muscle. That was the most terrifying part. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't reach for her rosary. She just looked at me with the patience of a woman who had spent 40 years watching people die. You're being ridiculous, she said. Then you'll have no problem taking a DNA test, I said. Ava and me. Simple cheek swab. Results in 3 days, she laughed. It was a small laugh, almost affectionate. Oh, Priya, you poor, stupid girl. You think a test will change anything. You think the law will help you. You're an Indian woman married to a white lawyer in a city that still thinks your name is too hard to pronounce. No judge will take a baby from a Christian family and give her to, she paused, searching for the word, to someone like you, not without proof, and you have no proof. Just a tired woman's paranoia. She picked up her purse. She walked past me. She smelled like gardenias and something else, something chemical and sharp. At the door she turned. Besides, she said, even if you were right, and you're not, what would you do? Go to the police. Tell them your mother-in-law, a decorated nurse, a church elder, switched babies in a hospital where she's respected and you're just another immigrant doctor working nights. They'll laugh you out of the station. They'll put you on a psych hold. And then where will Ava be? She closed the door behind her. I stood in the hallway, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short gasps, and I realized something terrible. She was right, not about the test. Not about the law, but about the power. She had it. I didn't. She had 40 years of connections, of reputation, of whiteness in a system built to believe women like her over women like me. I had a hunch. I had data. I had a baby who felt wrong in my arms, and I had nothing else. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Ava's room, the nursery with the yellow ducks and the Brahms mobile, and I watched her sleep. She was 8 weeks old. She had David's chin. She had Margaret's forehead. She had nothing of mine. I thought about my mother. I thought about the night she held me after my first shift at the convenience store when I was 13 and had been robbed at gunpoint by a man who took $40 and my sense of safety. She didn't call the police. She didn't file a report. She just held me and said, in Tamil, the world will try to take pieces of you, Kanna. Your job is to decide which pieces they get. I decided that night. Margaret could have the pieces she had already taken, but she would not have the rest of me, and she would not have Ava, not forever. I started researching, not as a mother, as a doctor, as a woman who had learned to survive by knowing more than the people who wanted to hurt her. The nurse who had been on duty that night, Helen Kowalski, according to the shift records, had retired 6 months after Ava's birth, moved to Arizona, dying, according to the obituary I found online, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months to live. I booked a flight to Phoenix the next weekend. Told David I was going to a medical conference, told Margaret nothing. Helen was in a hospice facility in Scottsdale, small room, single bed, a crucifix on the wall and a morphine drip that clicked like a metronome. She was 7'4", shrunken, her skin the color of old parchment, but her eyes were sharp. Nurse's eyes, the kind that see everything and pretend to see nothing. I wondered when you'd come, she said, before I could introduce myself. Margaret said you might, said you were smart, said you were trouble. I sat in the chair by her bed. I didn't touch her. I didn't need to. I need to know what happened. I need to know if my daughter is mine. Helen closed her eyes. The morphine clicked. Margaret and I went to nursing school together. 1962. St. Mary's. She was the only one who talked to me when the other girls called me Palak. We were friends. Real friends once. And she came to me 3 weeks before your due date, said she was worried about you, said you weren't maternal, said you were going to ruin her granddaughter with your ambition, your godlessness, your Helen paused, winced, your foreign ways. She said she knew a girl, a Guatemalan, no papers, no family, pregnant, alone, living in a garage in Pilsen, if the babies were born close together, if no one knew. My hands were gripping the chair arms so hard my knuckles were white. You switched them. I switched the bracelets, Helen whispered, while you were under. While the Guatemalan girl was still bleeding on the table, still screaming, still asking for her baby in Spanish that no one bothered to translate. I gave her yours. I gave you hers. It took 30 seconds. Margaret was waiting outside. She took the Guatemalan girl's paperwork. Made sure she was discharged before anyone asked questions. Made sure she disappeared. Why? My voice was barely audible. Why would you do that? Helen opened her eyes. They were wet, not with tears, with something older. Margaret said it was God's will. She said the Guatemalan girl couldn't give the baby a good life. She said you didn't deserve one. She said, Helen coughed, a wet, rattling sound. She said she was saving the child, saving her from 2 mothers who weren't fit. And you believed her? I believed I owed her. Helen's voice was fading. She got me this job. She covered for me when I stole pills. She was my friend, my only friend, and I was dying, I thought. I thought I could do one good thing before I met God. I thought you thought wrong, I said. I stood up. I looked down at her, this shrunken woman, this dying accomplice, and I felt nothing. Not pity, not rage. Just the cold, clear space where a feeling should be. The Guatemalan girl. Lucia, where is she? I don't know. Margaret never told me. She said it was safer if I didn't know. Safer for who? Helen didn't answer. Her eyes had closed again. The morphine clicked. I walked out of the room, out of the hospice, into the Phoenix heat that felt like a punishment, and I called a private investigator from the parking lot. Find her, I said. Lucia Herrera. Guatemalan. 24. Had a baby girl at County General on March 14th, discharged that morning, no follow-up. I don't care what it costs. Find her. It took him 3 weeks. 3 weeks of waiting, of pretending, of smiling at Margaret across Sunday dinners, and pretending I didn't know what she had done. 3 weeks of holding Ava and feeling the wrongness settle into my bones like a second skeleton. He found Lucia in Pilsen. Same garage, apparently. A converted basement under a bodega, shared with 4 other women. She was working 3 jobs, dishwasher, hotel maid, factory line, and caring for a toddler she called Maya. My Maya. The name I had chosen in my head before I knew I was having a girl, before Margaret took that too. I didn't approach her. Not yet. I watched her from across the street, from my car, from the shadow of a laundromat. I watched her carry Maya on her hip while she unlocked the basement door. I watched her sing to her in Spanish, songs I didn't understand but recognized, the way you recognize love in any language. I watched her wrap Maya in a blanket that was too thin for Chicago winter and hold her close, closer, like she was trying to press her own warmth into the child's bones. And I knew. I knew with a certainty that had nothing to do with blood tests or birth records or the law. Lucia didn't know Maya wasn't hers. She didn't know she was raising my biological daughter while I raised hers. She didn't know she was a victim, and I couldn't tell her, not yet, because if I told her I would have to take Maya. And if I took Maya I would have to give up Ava, and I couldn't do either. I couldn't do anything except watch and wait and plan. I spent the next 4 years becoming the daughter-in-law Margaret wanted. I went to Mass. I joined the rosary group, me, Priya, the Hindu doctor, sitting in a church basement with women who prayed for my soul while I prayed for something else entirely. I learned to make Margaret's recipes, the pot roast, the green bean casserole, the lemon bars she brought to every funeral. I sent her photos of Ava every day. I let her babysit. I let her dress Ava in frilly dresses I hated and take her to church services where she learned to pray to a God I didn't believe in. And all the while, I collected evidence. I recorded Margaret, every conversation, every confession disguised as advice. Every time she said, Ava's so much better off with us, or her real family, or some women just aren't meant to be mothers. I saved the emails. The ones where she told David I was unstable, obsessive, not bonding properly. The ones where she forwarded articles about postpartum psychosis in immigrant women with subject lines like FYI. I found the bank records. The $5,000 withdrawal from Margaret's savings account 3 days before Ava's birth. The deposit into Helen Kowalski's checking account the week after. The payment to a consulting firm that didn't exist, which I traced to a shell company run by a man who had been fired from County General for selling patient information. I found the forger. A man in Cicero who made fake birth certificates for undocumented immigrants. He remembered Margaret. Crazy church lady, he called her. Paid me double to make a certificate saying the Guatemalan girl's baby was born at home. Said it was for the child's protection. I didn't ask questions. You don't ask questions when someone pays in cash. I built a case. Not for court. I still didn't trust the courts, not with Margaret's connections, not with my name, not with the fact that I had no legal proof Ava wasn't mine beyond a hunch and a missing birthmark. I built a case for something else. For the moment when I would not need a judge, when I would be the judge. David found out eventually, not everything, just enough. It was a Thursday. Ava was 4. We were in the kitchen and I was making dinner, Margaret's pot roast, ironically, and David was reading emails on his phone. He looked up suddenly, his face gray. Priya, he said. Did you hire a private investigator to follow my mother? I didn't look up from the cutting board. Yes. Why? Because she stole my baby, David. She switched Ava with another child. She bribed a nurse. She falsified documents. She destroyed a woman's life, and you knew. The silence was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming. David set down his phone. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street, at the cars passing, at the lives being lived by people who didn't know their world was built on lies. I didn't know, he said, but his voice was wrong. Too quiet. Too careful. You got the emails, I said, the ones she sent you before the birth, the ones where she said I wasn't fit, the ones where she said she would make sure the legacy continued properly. You got them, David, and you didn't stop her. I didn't know she would. I thought she was just venting, just worried. She's my mother, Priya. She's all I have left. She's not all you have left. I turned to him. I was holding the carving knife. I didn't remember picking it up. You have a wife, you have a daughter, you have a family that you chose, and you chose her, every time. You chose not to see, not to ask, not to protect us. David turned around. He was crying. I had seen him cry twice before at his father's funeral and the night I told him I was pregnant. Both times I had held him. Both times I had believed his tears meant something. I love you, he said. I love Ava. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know. But you suspected, I said, didn't you? The night she was born. The way my mother looked at her. The way she said just like David's, you suspected, and you were too weak to ask. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I set down the knife. I walked past him. I went to Ava's room, where she was sleeping in her princess bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and the nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling. I sat on the edge of her bed and I watched her breathe. In, out, the rhythm of a life that wasn't mine but was entirely mine. I didn't leave David that night. I didn't leave him the next week or the next month. I stayed. I played the role. I smiled at Margaret's birthday dinners and pretended I didn't know about the garage in Pilsen, about the woman singing Spanish lullabies to my biological daughter, about the 4 years of lies that had built the life I was living, because I was waiting for the right moment, for Margaret's 60th birthday, for the party she had been planning for a year, the celebration of a life of service, as she called it. The church hall rented, the bishop invited, the slideshow of her nursing career, her volunteer work, her beloved grandchildren. The speech David would give about the woman who taught us the true meaning of maternal love. I would give her a different kind of speech. The party was on a Saturday in October. The church hall was decorated with white lilies and photos of Margaret at every stage of her life: young nurse, young mother, young widow, matriarch, 200 people, her rosary group, her former colleagues, the bishop who blessed her with oil and called her a servant of God. David gave his speech. He was good at speeches. He talked about sacrifice, about unconditional love, about the woman who had always put others first. I sat in the front row, wearing the dress Margaret had picked out, navy blue, modest, appropriate, and I smiled. I smiled so hard my face hurt, and then it was my turn. Margaret asked me to say a few words, I said, standing at the podium. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this for months. About what she's meant to me, about what she's taught me. I looked at her. She was beaming. This was her moment, her coronation. The validation of everything she had stolen, everything she had destroyed, everything she had called God's will. Margaret taught me that motherhood is not biology, I said. It's choice. She taught me that a mother will do anything to protect her child, even things that look like cruelty from the outside. She taught me that love can be a weapon. And she taught me that the women who smile the sweetest often hide the darkest secrets. The room was quiet, confused. I could see David in the front row, his face pale, his hands gripping the chair arms. But I didn't come here to talk about what Margaret taught me, I continued. I came here to introduce you to someone. I pressed a button on the remote in my hand. The projector, which had been showing photos of Margaret's nursing career, flickered, and then it showed something else. A video, recorded in Helen Kowalska's hospice room. Helen dying, confessing everything. The bracelet switch. The bribe. The Guatemalan girl discharged into the dark, clutching a baby that wasn't hers. Then the forger. The fake birth certificate, the cash payments. Then Margaret herself, recorded in my kitchen 3 months ago when I finally confronted her with the evidence and she broke beautifully, broke completely and admitted everything. I saved that child, she slurred, drunk on gin I had provided. I gave her a real mother, a real family. That Guatemalan girl would have ruined her. She would have ended up in a gang or deported or dead. I did what God wanted. I did what was right. The video ended. The room was silent, absolutely silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, and then I pressed another button. The video went live, not just in this room, on Margaret's Facebook page, which I had hacked that morning, on the church's YouTube channel, on the WhatsApp group of the Amigas del Rosario, on every platform where Margaret had built her reputation as a saint, a servant, a mother to the motherless. This is my daughter, I said, holding up a photo of Ava. And this, I held up another photo of Lucia and Meyer in the basement in Pilsen, is my daughter too. Margaret switched them. She stole one child from a desperate mother and gave her to me, thinking I would be grateful, thinking I would never question, thinking I was too foreign, too ambitious, too godless to deserve the truth. I looked at Margaret. She was standing now, her face purple, her hands shaking. You, she sputtered. I what? I asked. I'm telling the truth, I'm exposing you. I'm doing what you should have done 40 years ago when you decided that your God gave you the right to decide who deserves to be a mother. The bishop stood up. This is highly inappropriate. You're right, I said. It is. What's inappropriate is a nurse who uses her position to steal babies. What's inappropriate is a church that protects her. What's inappropriate is a system that believes women like Margaret over women like Lucia, over women like me, over and over and over again. I walked down from the podium. I walked past Margaret, who was collapsed in her chair, sobbing now, the sobs of a woman who had never imagined consequences. I walked past David, who reached for my hand and missed. I walked out of the church hall into the October air and I didn't look back. The fallout was immediate. Margaret was expelled from her church ministry within a week. Her rosary group disbanded. Her former colleagues, the ones who had covered for her, who had looked the other way, who had called her a saint, stopped returning her calls. The nursing board opened an investigation. They couldn't prosecute her for a crime that was past the statute of limitations, but they could strip her of her license, her honors, her name. David lost his job. The law firm didn't fire him officially, they couldn't, not without proof he knew, but they restructured his position, reassigned his clients, suggested he take time to focus on his family. He moved into a studio apartment in Evanston. He called me every day for 3 months. I didn't answer. And Ava, my Ava, the daughter who wasn't mine but was entirely mine. I didn't tell her, not then, she was 4, she wouldn't understand. But I started taking her to Pilsen on weekends. I started introducing her to Lucia, carefully, gradually. This is my friend, she has a daughter your age, wouldn't it be nice to play? I watched Ava and Maya together, these 2 girls who shared my DNA in different configurations, who looked at each other with the curiosity of strangers who recognize something familiar. Lucia still didn't know. I couldn't tell her, not yet, because telling her meant taking Maya, and taking Maya meant destroying the only life Lucia had built, and I couldn't do that. Not to her. Not to the woman who had loved my daughter when I couldn't, who had sung to her in Spanish, who had wrapped her in thin blankets and held her close against the Chicago winter. So I did something else. I helped Lucia without telling her why. I paid her rent, anonymously, through a church charity I set up. I hired an immigration lawyer, the best in Chicago, and made sure Lucia got her green card. I got Meyer into a preschool program, a good one, with scholarships that didn't exist until I created them. And I founded something, not a nonprofit, not a foundation, just a clinic. Open 3 nights a week, in the basement of County General, staffed by volunteers. We called it La Puerta, the door, for undocumented mothers, for women giving birth without insurance, without family, without protection. We provided doulas who spoke their language. We provided lawyers who stayed in the room. We provided a promise. No one will take your baby. No one will switch your bracelet. No one will make you disappear. It was small. It was underfunded. It helped maybe 50 women a year. But every time I walked through that basement door, I thought of Lucia's basement in Pilsen. I thought of Margaret's church hall. I thought of the 2 rooms where my life had been split in half, and I thought, I am building a door where there used to be a wall. Margaret is 62 now. She lives in a subsidized apartment in Skokie, working the register at a grocery store. I see her sometimes from my car in the parking lot. She looks smaller. Older. The kind of woman you pass without noticing, which is perhaps the worst punishment for someone who spent her life demanding to be seen. I don't speak to her. But every month, on the anniversary of Ava's birth, March 14th, I leave a box on her doorstep. Diapers, formula, onesies, things she doesn't need, things that are too small for the grandchildren she no longer sees. And a note, always the same, for you to remember what it costs to raise a child that isn't yours. She never responds, I don't expect her to. David and I are separated, not divorced. He sees Ava every other weekend. He's a good father in his way, gentle, patient, present. He doesn't ask about Maya. He doesn't ask about Lucia. He pretends still that if he doesn't name things, they don't exist. I let him, for Ava's sake, for now. Ava is 8 now. Meyer is 2. They know each other. They play together. They don't know they're sisters, not yet. But they will, when they're ready. When I've built enough doors that the truth won't destroy them. Lucia knows now. I told her last year on Maya's 7th birthday, in the kitchen of the apartment I helped her rent, a real apartment with windows, with heat, with a door that locks. I told her everything. The switch, the bracelet, the years of watching her from across the street. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just looked at me with eyes that held the same exhaustion I saw in my own. And she said, in English that had grown fluent with practice, Meyer is my daughter. And she is yours. And she is hers. We are all her mothers. And that is enough. We are not friends, Lucia and I, we are something else. Something that doesn't have a name in English or Spanish or Tamil. Two women who were made enemies by a woman who thought she was God and who chose instead to be allies. I'm Priya. I'm 36 years old. I'm an emergency pediatrician. I live in a house with yellow ducks in the nursery and a daughter who doesn't have my eyes and another daughter who doesn't know my name and a third mother who sings her to sleep in a language I am still learning. I am not whole. I will never be whole. There will always be a piece of me in a basement in Pilsen, and a piece in a church hall in Skokie, and a piece in an or at 3:47 a.m. on a March morning when someone decided my body was not my own. But I am here, I am working. I am holding the hands of women who are giving birth in fear and I am telling them, you are not alone. No one will take your baby. No one will switch your bracelet. Your body is yours. Your child is yours. And that is enough. If you're listening to this and someone has ever tried to take what was yours, your child, your body, your story, your name, I want you to know they don't get to keep it. Not forever. Not if you refuse to let them. You are not the refrigerator. You are not the storage. You are not the ingredients waiting for someone else's recipe. You are the mother. You are the door. You are the one who decides what gets born. See you in the next story.